Hey, how's it going, everyone? Before we get started into this next episode, I want to acknowledge and say thanks again to all of you who have signed up for the Extras membership through my Buy Me a Coffee account. It's really gone a long way towards helping with some of those monthly expenses that I incur every month doing this podcast, and it really is a big help. So for those of you that have been on the fence about signing up and would like to support Extra while getting extra content in return, it's just $10 a month, and you just go to my website at falconrychronicles.com, click on the Would You Like to Support link, sign up there at my Buy Me a Coffee account, and you'll get access to at least a couple of new episodes a month, one of which oftentimes at least is a video episode. So anyway, if it's something that you're interested in, it really helps towards the sustainability of the podcast into the future, and I really appreciate the help. So again, thank you all, and really appreciate your support. And I also want to say a big thank you to all of those who have checked out the other shows on the Extreme Performance Outdoor Network, which this podcast is now a part of. It's great being a part of a network that really gives back and tries to support causes that support the rights of not only houndsmen but also hunters across the country. So it's really nice being a part of a network that really puts their money where their mouth is and walks the walk in that regard. And I'm really happy to continue to be a part of it. The other shows on this network are really fun to listen to, and there's lots of great information. So if you haven't yet, just search Extreme, starting with an X, Performance Outdoor Network on any major podcast platform that you listen through, and enjoy. And now, on to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
I took him over to Brian's and turned him loose, and he hadn't flown but maybe 3 times in 5 years, 7 years. He was 8 years old, so it had been about 5 years since I'd flown him. And he just rang up like he'd been flying 10 days earlier. You know, I mean, he went up 700-800 feet, I guessed, and jumped a grouse, and he came down and caught it right in front of me. And he was the best grouse hawk I'd ever had.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. And once again, Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a great time with their families over the last couple weeks of holidays, and you've been enjoying this content that's been coming at you from Wyoming. We've got a few more left from Wyoming, and we're back up in Sheridan for this episode with Pete Widener. And I think this is going to be another one that you all really enjoy a lot. Pete's another guy that has a rich history in the sport, lots of great experiences. So as per usual with these types of episodes, I really can't do much justice in describing a lot of what's talked about and all that kind of good stuff. So we're just going to jump right into this episode that's coming back at you from Sheridan once again with Pete Widener. Here we go. I felt very fortunate so far to be able to have all these conversations with you guys up here. I mean, there's a lot of history between the lot of you and stuff, and of course, some of you might be a little bit more, I don't know, like jokingly saying about it that, you know, it may not always be accurate information or good information, but you know, the stories and the different experiences that I've heard from you all these last couple of days have been really cool, and I think people are going to really enjoy hearing them. So appreciate y'all.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as you know, is with where things are at right now with yourself, I know we were just talking about, you know, propagation and, you know, of course, flying birds and all that kind of stuff. But let's just start off. I want to find out a little bit more about what your current average day looks like in terms of falconry. I mean, are you still flying birds at the moment, or?
Oh yeah. Well, not today, but I've put them up for now. But yeah, I normally would start flying in the first part of August and try to get birds trained. You like to fly new birds, so I usually try to get something that's flyable by September, and or before, even training wise. And I really used to go all the way through the end of April to keep training. But I'm not flying one right now, to answer your question.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and as far as, I mean, has there really been any seasons where you've not been able to fly, or, I mean, have you been pretty consistent with it for a long time, or?
Yeah, well, most of my life. This is the worst year I've ever had. I had pneumonia in November. That knocked me back pretty good. I used to go to quite a few of the NAFA meets and didn't make that. And I'm a daily guy that flies. I fly daily. I try to. It depends on the weather, of course, and that sort of thing. But
yeah. Well, I mean, throughout your life, have you always been able to do that? I mean, have you ever? I mean, I don't know if you're one of those guys that kind of had one of those careers that allowed you to be able to do that every day. But I mean, for those I'm always envious of people that do. I mean, I could myself if I never wanted to sleep, which I will admit, like the first couple of seasons I had were like that. I sacrificed a lot of sleep. As the years have gone on, I've had to start kind of reining myself in a little bit because, as of course, the older we get, the less our body tends to deal well with that. But I mean, what have you done throughout your life that's afforded you to be able to fly every day?
Well, I picked a living that allowed me to live on site where I fly, and I was fortunate enough to get into ranching. My father wasn't particularly interested, who lived here. I came down to visit him for a week and never left. And I've been married 47 years to Lucy, but I had a wife before that, and so did she. Had a husband, and so we had, anyway, we both chose to, if it was available and it became available to live here and to raise cattle, and it's a tough living. I mean, but it allowed me to decide when I quit every day, and I pretty much always made. There's times I didn't, but for the most part, on a monthly basis, I flew pretty much every day, and was able to, and am able to just call my own shots more so now than then. I'm fortunate enough to have other income at this point and things, but I still raise cattle, and I hope I die. When I do die, that I'm still doing what I do now, and I'm active in it, but not as active as I was. But I don't know if that answers your question. But,
yeah, no, it does. I mean, like I said, everybody's got different things that allow them to, for example, I've got several people that have, that are into abatement, and I've got other people that have pretty significant, Lauren, for example, she works remotely, and it affords her some schedule flexibility. And, I've got other people also that I know that have a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, type job and stuff too. And it's one of those things where everybody kind of has to mold things around, what they're doing. But, it sounds like, though, that, you were fortunate in that regard. And, to be able to have that kind of flexibility is always nice. Although I'm still trying to picture in my mind how you were able to, like you said, ranching,
there's times I couldn't do what I wanted to do every year. There still is, brandings, things that take all day, that sort of thing. You just gear your bird to it. But, in the end of the day, my bird calls the shots. That's where my loyalty is always, and that's why I did what I did. I had opportunities to get in the oil business, all sorts of things, and just chose to. I thought about, I would have made a hell of a lot more money doing what if I'd have taken that path, but I only want more money to do what I can do already.
Sure.
But it's a compromise working for families and with families and stuff. You got to give something up, and I would probably do that a little differently if I did it over. But I fly my birds. Just you gotta fly them to make good birds, and once they're in a mold of being able to perform the way you want them, you can get away with more scattered flying as opposed to daily routines. But to get them trained and to get them going, I believe anyway, with my style of training. I've never used a balloon or a kite or anything like that. It just something that wasn't part of my learning on it, and so I use pigeons and quarry, and make it tougher for them every day, and get them to like it and get it going on it, whether it's ducks or whatever. I like using ducks actually because they're here for one thing. They're gone after November for the most part, but make easy shots, let them get kind of wed to hunting that way, and then go to big ponds and big areas and broaden their horizons and let them miss them. You back and forth with them, and hopefully by November when it starts freezing up here, I've might catch 20 to 40 ducks over that amount of time, and I don't feed them to them. I let all of them go. Last year I started a peregrine and I flew her, and I was kind of wary of the situation with the avian flu and stuff, but I did it anyway, but she only killed one out of 28 ducks. And that was because I couldn't find her, and right away, and she'd broken into it, and it ate some, and I worried about it, but nothing happened. But the other ones, they're my birds anyway. They're pretty inept at killing early on, and you can get in and turn almost all of them loose.
Yeah,
they don't all live, but it's no different than catch and release fishing. I mean, you turn loose 100 fish you catch, and some of those are scarred up pretty good, and maybe don't make it, but they definitely don't make it if you don't let them go.
Exactly, and that's the exact saying that we have in our group at home too. I mean, there's some guys that would just start, once they got X amount of rabbits in the freezer, they would just start catching and releasing the rest of them. And there's some people that don't agree with that, but that's what basically our mind is like. 100% sure that if you dispatch it and put it in your bag, that it's dead. Yeah. It's gonna, But I mean, if you let it go. Sure, I mean it may or may not, but I mean there's zero chance of it if you go ahead and if it goes home with you in the game bag.
True. And it's a different deal with pheasants and huns especially get killed easily, but so do grouse. I mean it's harder to get in on upland birds, and the ducks are real good. They're tough and they're easier to let go. I think a lot more of those survive probably.
Yeah. I know. I agree, and like I said, once again, it's and going back to kind of what we were saying earlier in that, I mean, sure, I mean, this is very much one of those like, what you get out of it is what you put into it kind of deals, like a lot of things. I mean, odds are if you fly your bird, train your bird every single day, and get it to flying on a routine every day, usually the amount of success numbers and everything kind of starts coming hand in hand with that. I mean, odds are if you fly your bird every day, it's going to be a lot more well conditioned, and your numbers are going to be higher just from simple numbers. I mean, it's kind of like one of those common sense hand in hand kind of things. I mean, if you're only able to hunt on weekends and you have X amount of other scheduling obstacles and you're not able to fly your bird every day, well, I mean, you might still have decent numbers or whatever, and this, that, and the other, but your bird's not going to be as well conditioned, odds are, or it might end up there, but it's going to take a lot longer to get it there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the philosophy I use. I like getting new birds because I ruin them by the time they're 2 or 3 years old. They catch game, but I'm not careful enough about the slips I pick, and sometimes, and just want to get it. I just got that. That's kind of what I bring to the sport, probably as a hunter more than a trainer. But I think that the birds overall end up being, once they're in shape, you can get away with flying every 2 or 3 days and have probably maybe in some cases, I think, better birds because they got an energy load built up, and and if success breeds success, and if they're successful more than not early on, they sort of don't accept not being successful nearly as well as the ones that day after day after day get called back to the lure. They lose something there, I think. So,
Well, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier amongst ourselves before we started recording. I mean, the ones that falcons, they're just as opportunistic as anything, and like if they know they're going to get an easier meal or an easier reward by doing this versus that, then they're going to obviously choose to do the other thing that was easier. And if you routinely do something that's that's different than I mean, like I said, they're going to gravitate towards that, I mean, it's I mean, so basically you're one of these guys that then it sounds like that. I mean, I know throughout your I don't know, more of the latter part of your falconry career, is more geared towards kind of the show, the flights and things like that. But I mean, I'm assuming that the hunter side of you, at least one point in your life, was really like, I've got to fill the game bag, type of mentality. I mean, how was that progression for you over your time?
Well, like I said, I think I probably brought being a hunter to this game more than I did being an artist or a practitioner of the sport in what I perceived to be the way a lot of people do it. I caught a lot of game, And it was important to me to catch a lot of game. And like I said, it's like anything else, whether you're fishing or bird hunting or whatever with a shotgun. Early on, you just want to kill something. And I mean, I started when I was 11 years old. So, I mean, I caught a mouse with a kestrel before a cat killed a kestrel. And that was the first bird I ever had, you know. And I rode my bike out south of town in Whitefish, Montana, and where I'd seen one on a telephone pole. There were probably 10 of them between there and where I went. But I drove back on the bike to where I was and caught the bird, trained it, and my mom wasn't real keen on that, having that in the house, and I left it out on a block overnight, and a cat killed it. But anyway, not a good story, but life, that's the way it worked.
Well,
when I you know, there weren't any licenses in Montana, and raptors weren't protected in the early 60s.
Sure.
And so, you know, it wasn't, not that that's a reason for it to die, but it was just, I didn't meet a falconer until I was 15 years old.
Well, and that's what we were talking about earlier in one of the other conversations. I think when I was talking to Pete Jenny earlier, you know, as we were talking about, you know, I mean, that's one common theme that you start hearing more. I mean, especially whenever you're talking to guys that got into this without much mentorship before there were rules, regulations, or a lot of people even doing it, and it was a lot harder to get in touch with people. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, people, you know, when they were teaching themselves how to go about it, I mean, kind of unfortunately had a lot of instances or tough learning curves, you know, with that kind of
exactly.
thing.
So, I look back on that, and I met a guy that was meant to have been a falconer when I was about 15 or 16, and but I actually had some innovative things that worked for me that they didn't have, but they had to. I didn't even have a book until I was well past it. I just thought it was cool. I saw an article in the National Geographic, I think it was, or somewhere. I think it was National Geographic, and got me stimulated thinking about it. And I grew up reading bird books and stuff. I learned to read really from a bird book, and as a really young kid, and I learned birds that way, and learned to. I could recognize the letter. I didn't know the alphabet even, but I knew what it said, bluebird or whatever it happened to be, you know. And anyway, and I loved to hunt. I always had that interest, and it was entered into that through adults that I knew and stuff. And my mother was a hunter also, and so I had the background in hunting. And when I saw hawks catching stuff and realized what these guys were supposedly doing with it, you know, I thought I got to do that. And that's what got me started on that. Yeah. And but everything, I think different people bring different things to the table, so to speak. Some guys are real good bird trainers. I don't put myself in that category, but I'm a pretty tenacious hunter, and I'm finally learning to do it with style. A little bit.
Just now, huh?
Just a little bit.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, everybody's kind of, you know, and everybody's, you know, some people are more right-brained or left-brained and whatever, and I've, you know, some are more artistic, some are more scientific, you know, so on and so forth. But yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of got different approaches and more emphasis on certain aspects of it than others. I think that definitely goes without saying. And so, I mean, out of curiosity, how did you catch the kestrel whenever you saw it? I mean, how did you go about doing that, not having any knowledge?
Well, there was in the article I read, the guy had a cage with a bird in it, and with the nooses tied. Horsehair nooses, I think, were on it or something. I can't even remember the total thing. But anyway, I saw the model of it. Basically, used what you would call a ball shotry to trap it. And I put it. I actually didn't think the hawk could see it very well, so I tied it on the top of it. It was about a 1 foot by 1 foot cage I had with a mouse in it, 2 mice actually, and tied it on top of a fence post. And immediately, as soon as I walked away from it, I didn't even get back to my bike on the highway, and it was down hovering over it and landed on a post next to it, and then jumped over on it. The minute he touched it, I went charging over there. Of course, he wasn't hung, but you know, it was a trial and error from the beginning. But that's how I caught it.
That's cool. Yeah, I just wondered how you garnered enough, you know, where you got the initial knowledge enough to even make your own makeshift trap or whatever.
It was just from the article I read and stuff.
That's cool. Yeah. So I mean, you said you were from Montana, and how long did you live there before you moved around?
Well, actually, I was born in Lexington, Kentucky. And
that's right. Yeah, I remember.
And I moved to my parents. My dad had a large ranch up in Blackfoot Valley in Montana. My parents got divorced in in 59, late 50s. And I was born in 50, so I was about 9 years old, I guess, or 10 years old. Anyway, my mom stayed in Montana, and he went his way, and we saw him continually. But I mean, they were divorced, and I grew up in Whitefish, ended up going to boarding school in Minnesota, and went down to kind of get to know my dad a little better and stuff. And when I was graduated from high school for a couple of years of college in Kentucky, and finished up in Montana. And went back to Montana and lived there for a while. Got married in Kentucky. Came back. We got married real early. I was 20 years old, and got divorced at 23. Remarried at 27. Here I am, still married to the same girl now, but for quite a while. But but anyway, that's kind of my history. I came down here for a week to just sort of chill out and never left.
Yeah.
Well, that was in 74, I think, or 73.
Yeah. So you've been out here a long time then.
50 years or so here, yeah.
Is there anything about Kentucky that you miss at all? Comparatively speaking?
Not much. You didn't have too big of horizons at 6 years old. But No. I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel around quite a bit. Do things like that and see different places. I'm pretty happy here.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about the other night at dinner, I mean, Lexington's only about a 3-hour drive east of me. So,
I guess that's right. Yeah,
I'm pretty familiar with it. I've been there several times. I worked there briefly, and I mean, there's some cool things about it. I mean, it's very much a big college town now.
Yeah,
University of Kentucky being there and everything. So, but no, I'm just curious. I mean, there's sometimes people move, and it was seemed like when they moved, it was. An eternity too late, they couldn't get out of there quick enough and stuff. But, I mean, when you're that young, I guess it's just kind of whatever.
You mold in to whatever the environment is. And I mean, it was kind of a chore to have birds at boarding school. And I had 3 of them there while I was there, but it was it was a military school to boot. And it was pretty regimented in what you could do and couldn't do. And I was able to kind of bend the system a little. But it was still, I had no car or anything to fly birds. I walked everywhere I went. And, it just wasn't near to what you could do elsewhere, but it worked all right.
Yeah,
I got out of there.
You made it out. Yeah, I mean, when you were in boarding school in that area, though, I mean, since you didn't have ready access to transportation, I'm assuming that there was probably some places close to around there where you could just walk to or ride a bike to or whatever.
Yeah. No, I didn't even have a bike, but I mean, we went to school on Saturday as well, but I had time off daily, and I was able to integrate it into athletics after I had been there a year or two, and they let me. I started out as, doing some sports and stuff, and then they let me walk away from those, and that was time I was able to fly the bird. But it was a stretch to make it work. But
sounds like it. I mean, what were you flying at the time?
I had a prairie falcon tiercel. Was the first big falcon I had. And I had a couple of peregrines there. Actually, they were ISs I took in Montana. And they were legal in those days. Like I said, Montana didn't really protect anything till I think it was about 1970. They or 68, somewhere in there, they put a moratorium on those two birds. And then the Migratory Bird Treaty passed, if I remember right, around 1970. And they had the falcon, they're putting raptors under the treaty anyway. And then everything went to hell. There wasn't many legal peregrines around for a while.
Yeah.
That's what got me into breeding them, was basically trying to figure a way to get one, and I'd had a couple. They weren't particularly good. They were biases and not well-mannered. I lost both of them fairly quickly after I started flying them, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised. I mean, you're able to find very many places close to where you were at there that was conducive to
it wasn't good at all. There was a golf course right there, and there was a couple of ponds on it. For the falcons, and I basically couldn't wait for the vacations. And since we were in school so much, we had 3 weeks at a time, Christmas and March, and in March for spring break, 3 weeks, and so it spread it out a little more than it might have anywhere else. And I'd usually go home for those situations.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, that's like I said. That's all really interesting. I mean, and it goes back to the fact that just another attestation, if you will, as to if you really want to make something work, you'll find a way to do it.
Yeah. I pretty much caught the disease early on and have never gotten over it.
Yeah. So, I mean, whenever you initially, I mean, I did talk to a couple of other guys about this, but I mean, whenever you initially got settled into this area here in Sheridan, I mean, I know it's always been a lot of private land and all that, but whenever you initially got here, was that still the case, or was that still, I mean, has it always been pretty much that way?
The area here?
Yeah, the area and stuff. I mean,
my dad had bought a ranch here, and he wasn't really into ranching too much at that time, and really wasn't a passion. It was like a big yard to him, basically. And he allowed me to. I just came to visit him. Brought had a couple of birds with me, and for the week, just because I didn't have anywhere else, I took them with me anywhere I went, and I flew them here, and I just thought, boy, this is a perfect setup for me if I can just figure a way to make a living at it. And I was going to like I was mentioning to you earlier, I had some other opportunities, but I decided to just give it a shot with cattle and see what I could do. And I was single at the time, and it made it pretty easy to do. And I got lucky. I mean, I grew up around cattle ranching and that sort of thing, but I wasn't participating in it, especially monetarily and stuff. And I didn't have any money to speak of to go buy cattle, and I talked the bank into lending me some money. And the guy says, "Your dad know about this?" And I said, "Yeah, he knows about it." But I didn't go any further, and he didn't ask anymore. But he really didn't want me to do it. But anyway, they loaned me the money, and I got lucky. Just hit the timing right. Bought low and sold high on some steers and stuff a couple of times, and thought, what's the big deal about this business? This is unbelievable. And I'm flying my bird every day at my own calling and putting hay up and working, 14-hour days sometimes, keeping busy. But all worked out in the end. And I got married about 3 years later to Lucy, and 4 years later, I was 27 years old when I got married, and I and I was flying birds right along, and we have 3 boys, 3 kids, and that was a different kind of changed life around a little bit. But it's a good thing I had a good wife, because she did an excellent job of taking care of our boys, and not that I didn't, but I give her more credit than myself.
Yeah.
But anyway, Sheridan, land-wise and stuff, was always a ranching community, and it's here in the last 10 years, it's turned into a more people and more. It's not as rural as it used to be. Let's put it that way.
More urban.
Yeah, it's always been a hunting community, and the ranches along the face of the mountains and stuff have always been sort of the prize area to be, as far as the living conditions and stuff are real good. It's windy, but it's a mild area. It's the most game-rich country I ever lived in. I mean, I've big game hunted and stuff quite a bit wherever I've lived, and as a kid on up. And it blew me away to see the amount of deer and elk and stuff that live here. That's why it's a good cattle country. I mean, the Chinooks opens up all winter, generally speaking. We'll get tough winters and tough snows, and usually within a couple of weeks, we'll get a big wind, and it'll melt all the snow along the mountain, right at the face of the mountain, called a Chinook, and it lends itself to raising cattle as much as it does big game.
That's good.
Yeah, but
I'm always kind of humbled. Pretty much anytime I've gotten to work out west or be out west for any length of time. I mean, you know pretty much what I'm used to, or where I'm at, and it's always really neat just being in these areas, and you see all these different species of deer, pronghorn, all these different birds of prey that I don't have. I'm not used to seeing it all, don't have it all. Right. And seeing all this different aspects of nature, I mean, I definitely see the appeal of it. I'm not sure how well, like I said, the winters and other stuff about it don't really appeal to me very much, but I do always stay somewhat envious of all the different variety of wildlife and different options, that there is with all that out here.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I imagine just being an avid hunter your whole life. I mean, this was probably, just being out here was probably heaven for you for a while. At least obviously it still is. I mean, you're still here.
Yeah. Well, in Montana was no different. It's just,
sure.
Really, it's just, this is like a little piece of what Montana has a lot of. A lot of Wyoming isn't like this. If you've been in Rock Springs, you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. But this is a special part of the world, special part of the U.S. for sure for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't remember if you said the other. I mean, do you do a lot of fishing and stuff too?
Yeah, I like to fish a lot. I grew up being able to do that also, and trout fishing and deep sea fishing over the years. I lived in Florida some of the time where my dad did, and I'd visit him down there and fish there, and grew up fishing in Montana for trout and different things. I still got that disease too.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, fly fishing primarily?
Primarily, yeah. For not so much in saltwater, but in freshwater, yeah.
Yeah, I that's something, like I said, I still wish I could do more of. I mean, unfortunately, that's another thing I can blame Reddick for. Is getting me kind of sort of introduced to that, and just enough to just basically be a tease. And,
well, it's a lifetime. They're all lifetime hobbies. That's the thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, but and you never feel like, no matter what, it's why we always choose hobbies for ourselves that we just never ever will feel like we're ever great at. It's like
if you get to the top of the mountain, you don't want to climb it anymore. Falconry, you don't get to the top of the mountain.
Right.
You don't do it good enough, long enough to get over it. At least I never have.
Yeah, I mean, it's like going up the downside of the escalator. Yeah, it's
a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so, I mean, going back to the other aspects of things that you briefly mentioned or touched on, why you wanted to get into breeding and propagation for yourself, and it sounds to me like you kind of got into it for a similar reason as some other guys that I know got into it, more or less just so you can, produce birds for yourself, not ever have to worry about, not having one or having it be difficult for you to get one. But, I mean, just go a little bit more into that. I mean, talk about a little bit more of your motivation and what you primarily were focusing on, I guess.
Yeah, when they cut the peregrines off to get them, and I'd already had touched on having a couple of them, and they're of course a big part of the sport everywhere. I just decided there's got to be a way we can raise these things. I may never see another wild one, and there were still a few around this part of the country, but they were far and few between. They were rare, I saw angles that captive breeding could not only supply me birds, but just like what Cornell did, for example, with the peregrine fund when it started, and there was a guy named Dick Graham out there who was I think he's dead now, I'm not sure, but I got to know him a little bit. He had some peregrines and was raising them, and I was able to get sort of the byproducts of birds they couldn't release or didn't release or weren't allowed to release in his case. And I got a couple of peregrines that way, and wanted to try to breed them, do what everybody else was doing, and pretty much built a facility in hopes of getting birds. It's one of the few things. My dad was pretty helpful on that because I couldn't have afforded to build a building, and he said, "Well, I'll build a building, I'll lease it to you, and you tell me what you want to do." And we overbuilt a building pretty big and had 4 chambers in it. And but anyway, a couple of people offered me birds and to put in it, that they were looking for redundancy maybe for what they were doing. And mine, I'll go to hell. Somebody else will be able to. I'll put these out and I'll be able to get one from them kind of mentality, you know. And that was early on in the thing. And I didn't. I raised the first peregrines I think I had in. I think it was 82, but I'm not positive. It was right at early 80s. And, and I just was glad to have a pair of birds that bred. And I kind of went from there and started breeding the stuff that I liked and tried to get birds that I liked the looks of, first of all, as a first priority, because I couldn't really, it's pretty hard to evaluate them flying them with somebody else flying them. But anyway, I sorted through what I had over the years, and I'm still got some. I got more than I've got. Half my birds aren't breeding anymore, but it's like an old dog. I'm not capable. I'm not the kind of guy that can put them down, and I don't even know if it's lawful if you did. But I couldn't do it anyway. I just don't. So I just feed them, and I got more than a handful of birds that are 20 years old that are just being fed and costing me money. But, like I said, they gave me a lot of pleasure, and I didn't keep anything I didn't really think was almost all the birds I have, I've flown. And if they were good ones, I kept them. If they weren't, I ended up losing them, or in a lot of cases gave them away, whatever. Yeah. So, and the sale really allowed me to afford to raise them early on because I didn't have any money to speak of, and it's very expensive. I mean, the price of the birds are less than they were then, and the quail are 3 times as much, 4 times as much. So it's changing that way, but hanging in there so far.
Yeah. So I mean, you never really had never really had much motivation or aspiration then necessarily to do it commercially or for a career, but more of just
it's always been a hobby, and I'm very glad that they allowed commercialization of the birds in terms of being able to sell them and stuff, because it allowed me for sure to be able to afford to do it, and I'm sure other people were able to expand their projects larger if they wanted to. And quite a few of my birds went out to release different places. Kentucky, for one, I think they bought something like 20 or 30 birds from me over time, and Minnesota got some of them through that project up there that they had releasing in the Midwest.
Yeah, I know that there was a few places that were doing that, and I know that at one point they even released some in Evansville, where I live. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think I had a pair in Indianapolis, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Or one of my birds was there, and it nested in town. And that's some report. It was a bird from Kentucky that's where it ended up, and I can't remember the story on it totally. But this is quite a few years ago. But it was a Midwest bird. It was in Indiana for sure, and I just don't remember. I think it was Indianapolis is where it was. I'm not sure. They had they were all banded, so it got back to me that this bird was living there, and then I think it got killed or died or something the second year, and they found it or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that there's been lots of different places that have kind of gone about those those efforts in different ways. I mean, those release, the releases.
Well, the city releases, from what I know about them or heard about them, they are not as near as successful in surviving after they hack out a lot of windows and just the city environment. Even though they survive in them everywhere, they don't do as well a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they don't generally stick around very long where we're at. Yeah. Every so often we'll see them kind of like around the Ohio, different parts, along the river in between Indiana and Kentucky and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, yeah, I guess, like I said, it's totally understandable though. I mean, like I said, you're not the first person I've talked to, and it's completely understandable that you kind of want to have your own kind of pick of the litter, so to speak, and have your own supply. But I mean, I've been told there's plenty of guys I know too that raise their own quail and raise their own hawk food and all that. But did you ever think about getting into that at all?
I've killed more chickens, and if there's somebody out there keeping count, I'm in trouble. I raised chickens and quail for a long time, and just able to afford to buy them, and it's just hard to keep. It's hard to be motivated to do it for a long time. It's hard to find people that are going to stick with it and keep the quality up and all that. And that's why people do it themselves. And so far, I've been able to dodge that for a while.
Sure. Well, and you said you've pretty much, always kind of, favored peregrines over the other species because of their hardiness and stuff like that. But was there anything else that you ever thought you might end up trying or favoring more?
I've flown gerfalcons. I caught wild gerfalcons in Montana and flew them, and I got some gerfalcons at one point when Cornell got rid of them. I was able to get a pair from them and from some other people down the road. I raised a few for a few years, and as far as and I've flown a few couple captive ones and about 3 wild ones, I just like peregrines. I don't know. It was maybe it's because I never could get one again after I had the couple. They were real hard to get, and they were illegal to get, as a matter of fact, for quite a while. And the captive reared birds afforded a bird that I could get and keep if I could get a hold of some, and I was able to. And I've really, I'm pretty sure it'd be accurate to say that I probably haven't had anything but peregrines. I haven't had a year I've gone by. I haven't been flying a peregrine since I was maybe 20 years old, 25 years old, something like that.
It's a long time.
Yeah, and usually I only want one, usually, maybe 2. I've taken 2 several times, but it's a lot of work after about October. It gets short days, and I don't have time to just go fly falcons all day long. Usually I make do it in the evening for an hour or 2 or something like that, and you got to quit at 2:30 to go fly and it's dark at 4:30 here in the middle, one of the shortest day.
Sure.
So, anyway, 2 birds get to be a drag after about first to the middle of November.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that I've talked to and people that I know too, that just prefer where they, after a while they figured out, it's just like, I can fly more birds, but inevitably there's always one that ends up better than the others. So it's just like after a while they start putting more effort and just having one bird, because that bird gets all the attention, all the time, and people, I think, eventually figure out at some point that, at least for themselves anyway, that it's better to have one bird that gets all, and ends up being the best it can be, rather than trying to.
Yeah. And we were flying. It was not too bad a deal though when you're able to alternate days, and that's what I usually did when I had to. Anyway, was gorge, feed off a gorge, feed up to a gorge, and then maybe not fly the next day, and then ride on weight and stuff the next day, and it's better. The bird likes you a lot better when they get a gorge, and I don't think they resent the fact that they didn't eat one day. That it happens whether we got them or not. Sometimes hardwired to accept things like that. But when you take food away from them or give them not enough, you're harder to hood sometimes. A lot of different things can happen. So when you can feed your bird till it's full, I can remember flying. It was actually a gyrfalcon I had, and it was a imprinted gyrfalcon, and I started flying it at ducks, and I'd find it was really badly mannered if it didn't get a full crop. And so I'd just take it and throw the duck and the bird in the back of my car and go fly the other bird. And, I'd pick him up at night in the dark. He cropped so big he couldn't even see his feet. But he took him up to 2 days really to get rid of the duck, get rid of the effect of the duck and have a casting and that sort of thing. And man, he was ready to go the next day. Next time his time came around when he was hungry again. And he just was killing something every time I flew him, and he was living off it basically. And that's a nice deal, but I was starved for more flights, so that was a good time to have two birds, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. And, there's a few guys I know too that are doing that. They'll fly even up to 3 birds, but they always have one they basically alternate them they're only flying every 2 days.
Seems like the bird's manners, especially this was an imprint bird. They can be pretty resentful if you show them food and they don't have to eat it. So you don't show it to them. You just make sure they're full. Or ready to fly.
Sure. Yeah. No, and I'm assuming too that, so, you weren't primarily one of those guys then that focused on one type of quarry. Then you pretty much always.
Well, I didn't really fly sharp-tailed grouse, which is our main quarry here, special type quarry here. In Sheridan. I think we went a couple of times. I was with Pete Jenny, as a matter of fact, and his gyrfalcon caught one. We were over in East Slope in Montana, and it was really pretty exciting about it to have it happen where we lived and where I lived. Before that, they just weren't available without a couple 100-mile drive to get across the mountains and stuff. So I didn't focus on those much at all then, but mainly I'd flown ducks a lot and pheasants, and we had Hungarian partridge, and that was our main quarry. Those 3 things, and anything else was occasionally you caught something else, but that was about what we focused on.
Cool. Yeah, and I just didn't know if there was any other stuff that throughout your long falconry career that you'd ever thought about. It doesn't really sound like you'd even really need to, because you have so many different things here. But, was there at any point in time you thought about trying to go somewhere else to try and pursue other types of quarry that you had here? Or?
Oh yeah, I wanted to catch prairie chickens, so I caught lesser prairie chickens, greater prairie chickens. I've sage grouse. We have a lot of those. I've caught those. They don't interest me so much anymore. Chickens do, but they're. The sage grouse were good, but I never really flew them in the middle of winter. A lot of eagle trouble around here at times. The later in the winter it gets and stuff, and so you're hunting them in the fall. And I mainly hunted them when they were pretty easy to catch. I feel like they're really easy to catch. Even the old ones, they're easy to catch up until end of October, somewhere in there they get tougher. But I've traveled around to fly those things when I wasn't living here, and I still like to take trips places into Montana. And things like that, and different places in Wyoming. Yeah. But we've got the main group of sharp-tailed grouse in Wyoming that I'm familiar with is in this area right here. We're in it, and a lot of Wyoming's got sage grouse in different places, but chickens we don't have here. I think there probably might be a few along the border of Nebraska and those places, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, New Mexico, Texas. I've caught chickens in all those places, but anyway, Yeah, I got the bug to travel sometimes.
I understand. Yeah, and that's part of the allure for me of continuing to do this stuff and some other aspects of things that I do is because I do like seeing how things are in lots of other places and what other people, I would have to deal with and what turns other people's cranks in that regard. I've been fortunate to be able to see some pretty neat stuff, I think, so far. And I mean, have you gotten a chance to gone out of, or have you had a chance yet to get out of the country and see much hawking in other parts of the world yet? Or?
I've been out of the country a few times, but not falconry related.
Gotcha.
Really. Yeah. I haven't. Read about it, seen some video on it, in movies and stuff, but
yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting seeing, getting to see some of that stuff in other places and how they do it too. But no, I'm just curious. I someone that's been doing it as long as you have. I mean, some people are fortunate to be able to get away more than others and that kind of stuff. But I mean, so I'm basically then. I mean, what are your thoughts on? I mean, what have you found works for you and in your approach to to flying peregrines and stuff? I mean, I know there's a lot of people that, and I'm sure your outlook on this has probably changed over time, but I mean, there are some people that are just super purists and super like. I don't know. I guess you could use the word disciplined when it comes to, they won't take flights this way or that way or whatever. If it's not this pitch, they won't do it, and this, that, and the other. I mean, what are your personal thoughts on a lot of that, and what has kind of worked for you over time in your career?
Well, I actually think they're spot on, but I'm just not disciplined enough to follow through on it. The more you can set up the thing to make the bird think he did it right, and it's what you want him to do, fly high and nice stoop and kill something, that's what you're trying to do. But I just end up getting overwhelmed with the hawking a lot of times, and, I haven't been near as disciplined as I should have been. I'm trying to be better. When I get older, I'll probably figure it out.
Yeah, I mean that's like I said. It seems like there's always one way versus the other that people tend to lean towards, and I mean there's a lot of people too that I know that say they're one, but then when it comes down to it, they still want to put something in the bag, so they still pull the trigger and on the other side of that. And
I don't think that's such a motivation to me anymore. I don't really. I mean, we all want to catch something with our bird, but I'm tickled to death if the bird just flies high and puts on a good show and I can get it back. I sure want it the next time to catch something, but I mean, and that doesn't always happen, of course. But I like a good flight, quality wise. To me, at this point, is high pitch and bird hanging around, and they're always working on something that they're not doing quite right on. At least my birds, and so. But anyway, I'm striving to get there, but that's what's keeping me doing it for so long. Probably never get there, but that's the lure of the sport in a way.
Yeah, and are you going to be one of these guys too? That, I mean, no matter as long as you're able to walk and fully control of all your faculties, you're still going to be flying something in some way, shape, or form. Or
yeah, you were assuming a lot right there, right now.
The faculties that you still have.
I see it as my lifetime hobby, and I think it'll be a tough day for me when I, for whatever reason, can't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. But I haven't reached it yet that I know of.
That you know of. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think there's plenty of days where we all, as falconers, think like, I think I can sort of still do this, but I'm not really quite sure. And it's like, maybe I should hang this up because I sure feel like I suck at it right now.
I don't find it being that. That's not a problem yet for me that I can recognize.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, I like to ask this question occasionally too, especially with guys like yourself that have been doing this for so long. I mean, was there any other endeavors or any other styles or types of falconry with different species that you thought you would like to do, but probably will never get to do? Or
well, I've had a few Goshawks, and I've flown Cooper's hawk. I've flown a lot of different types of birds. I just and I've got the variety of terrain that would lend itself to accipiters, particularly, or red tail, even when we have rabbits, which we don't have many of now, but a lot of pheasants around and stuff and things, and they go to the cover, in the winter especially, and they're not available they don't set up a good flight for a long wing very often. So a goshawk, I've flown a few of those in the last few years and enjoyed it. Caught ducks and pheasants primarily, and it's just a little less. You're lacking a couple of dimensions flying them that you in terms of the pitch and flying high and that sort of thing that the falcons provide, and so it's a little more cut and dry. Bird gets on your fist, something gets up, flies over and kills it. That's it.
Yeah.
And I'm just not that motivated to kill that much as much as I am. It's a part of my property that I fly and stuff. It's underutilized because nobody does. Except when I was doing that and a friend or two would come out and fly. But it's so I've explored it, but I find it a little bit more boring for me than the long wings, and they're a lot more work.
Yeah,
for me,
they can be.
Yeah.
I'll probably end up flying my first one later this year, but I've watched people train and hunt with and fly with goshawks.
Yeah.
For
they're incredibly. There's a lot of almost all birds. One of the observations I have is that things like merlins and gyrfalcons and goshawks to a certain extent, it's not about catch and quarry. I've seen goshawks chase I raise homing pigeons, to train my birds with, and I get goshawks, and there's a lot of goshawks in all winter, most winters, and not so many this year actually, but generally there's usually a fair amount of goshawks around here. And I've seen them fly those pigeons so high you can't even see the pigeon. You wouldn't even know what species the hawk that's chasing them is. They're doing incredible flying, and merlins the same way. And people may be doing it now, but I've flown a couple of merlins, and they caught things, but they weren't. It wasn't a difficult flight or a traditional merlin flight that you see a wild merlin do. Even gyrfalcons, chasing stuff down and catching it way off and powers of flight and stuff. You see glimmers of it, but it's really hard to reproduce what the wild ones do. Mm-hmm. And so I guess they're underutilized in the way I flew them anyway. The merlins were and the goshawks. They caught things readily. If that's a clue that you have a good bird, then they were good birds, but they didn't begin to fly like what I've seen wild ones do in terms of long chases and, just kind of awesome type flights and put you in awe to watch it. Peregrines come closer you can come closer with long wings and peregrines and even prairie falcons too, to doing what they do in the wild. You can come closer to seeing that kind of setup in your falconry and in your captive flying. And so, I know my peregrines, when I get a good one or they're flying good, they do a lot about what I see the wild ones do,
Yeah, and I've had kind of a similar type of conversation before with other people too. That it's just like, and there's some people that are just want to limit out, like every day and that kind of thing and all that. And the irony in that is, I guess it's not really whatever floats their boat and
right.
stuff. I'm not knocking on that by any stretch, but like. In the wild, you're not going to see like a goshawk kill 5 rabbits and want to eat five more rabbits in a day.
I don't mean volume wise. I just mean long flights and
sure.
using pigeons as that example.
Sure.
And merlins ringing stuff up to a speck and dropping, catching one. And more talented people than me probably can do that, but I wasn't able to do it when I took an adventure with merlins a couple of times. And that was early on in falconry, but. They would fly from point A to point B and catch something, and it was a chase, but it wasn't any spectacular flying. And maybe it would have been if I'd have pursued it long enough. But a peregrine, any of the other long wings are they come closer to satisfying me anyway with what they do, as compared to say wild flights that I might have witnessed than the other birds do.
Sure.
And I'm not as excited about a bird flying out of a tree and grabbing something or flying off my fist and grabbing something as I am when they do something sort of extra special.
Sure. Yeah. And like I said, it's just kind of adding to your point and then emphasizing your point. I mean, like what we do a lot of times with a lot of these different hawks and the way we do it and how often, we do it. I mean, very rarely does it really emulate that in HM because like I said, sure, you can imprint, a goshawk or a Cooper's hawk or whatever and kill bazillions of whatever with it and stuff. But in the wild, you're not going to see them, not only like kill that volume in like a day, but of course, but also in the same way. But, I guess that's part of the sacrifice. I mean, some of these species it's going to be a lot harder to see more of what they would naturally do, without like I said, without kind of modifying that way anyway. But I usually don't try to catch more than one head of game with a bird in any given day. I mean, once in a while I've driven down to Buffalo, 40 miles down the road here and go to a hawk or rabbit and get out of the car and walk 5 feet and a rabbit gets up, my bird kills it. Or catches it and gets it to the point where I'm thinking, well, and on those rare occasions, I might try a second shot just because I drove so far down there to end it this quickly. But it's just not something that's part of my makeup. It's part of to be important that I caught 2 or 5 or 10. It's just I got a good flight. And even if it misses, it's not quite as good as the one they catch, but it's a lot of those missed flights are, way more spectacular than the ones that they catch them. Had that conversation earlier today too. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Yeah, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those flights that don't end with something in the bag that I mean, they're so good sometimes.
Pretty memorable.
Yeah. That I mean, sometimes you end up almost like I said, rooting for the rabbit in the end because they pulled this just amazing stunt and you're just like that. Damn thing deserves to live now, It's just like, I mean, it blows my mind sometimes. There's just, and it's just like, where did they learn that? Did he just learn that now? I mean, was that the first time he tried pulling that now? Or, is that like a patented move on his part? It's just, so I mean, I understand what you're saying. And, I mean, I think that, it just goes to show how we evolve, as people throughout time and where our priorities are and personalities, how they change throughout life. It speaks a lot for that. I think. Yeah. I mean, so as far as, how long do you think you're going to continue doing the, your propagation project though?
Well, I'd like to get out of it to a point, but I don't see myself quitting breeding birds because I selfishly would rather have one of my birds than somebody else's, and I like trapping birds, and I did a lot of that early, more so when I when it was available. But I think I'll do it until I can't do it, and I don't know what that'll mean. Either I'm dead or invalid or something, But I haven't tired. I tire of it sometimes, but it's just not being supported real well at this point. And like I was mentioning earlier, I don't think I quite got there to where what I was going to tell you. But even though I got a bunch of birds, about half of them are past egg laying, and they're in the female's case. The males are still. I've got semen out of a bird that's 25 years old, stripping it, and so they're fertile. The males stay fertile longer than the females do, but. I'm only going to need 4 to 5 birds this year to satisfy myself. I want one, but I don't have that many sales and that many things ahead, and so I just cut back on making them. And I've got 4 birds that I've got planned on being. Maybe I'll have 6 or 8 fertile eggs, and hopefully I'll get 4 or 5 young out of them. That's where I'm at. But as far as keeping on doing it, I'll keep doing it for myself. Yeah, one way or the other.
Yeah, and I think that pretty much like a lot of different things. I mean, it's kind of like you talk to a lot of hood makers and they go gung ho for a while and then they start to burn out a little bit, right? And then I found that the people that I know that have had big propagation projects and stuff over time, they eventually reach that point where it's like, all right, enough's enough. I gotta rein myself back in a little bit. And I just wasn't sure what that really meant for you.
Yeah, to me, I really like the birds I got, and I'd rather have my bird than a wild bird right now. I feel like I've got more of what I want than I'm probably going to be able to go out and duplicate or catch something better. But and that's how it started out, and that's how it's going to end. But right in the interim, like right now, the biggest problem I've run into is having birds that are beyond their reproductive ability, and yet they're still alive and still appear healthy, and everything's fine, except they're stuck in my barn, and I don't want to put them down, and I don't have any. I'd love to give them some of these birds to people if they wanted to fly them. Mm-hmm. And it opened my eyes this spring. I had an eagle kill my juvenile falcon in December, and I didn't have any birds left. I wanted a bird to fly, and I thought, I got birds in this barn this one particular bird was one of my better females. And anyway, I think I pulled her out of the chamber, and within about 4 days, she was taming up again. And she wasn't a tame bird particularly, but she just came back kind of ornery, but came around, and within a week, I was flying her. And it took about 3 weeks of her flying around my head and just screwing around, flying around. And all of a sudden, she went up 100 feet, and then she went up 200 feet, and within 10 days from that point in time, she's at 800 feet again and catching grouse. And I'm thinking, holy mackerel, I would have never dreamed this bird, which was born in 2010. Here we are in 2024. And she flew for 3 years, being molted in the barn. I usually put them up about now, pull them out in the fall. But she flew for 3 years under that pattern, laid eggs for 3 years, and then just quit, I've never had one do that, but she just quit laying. And she hadn't laid for about 4 years, and she's in there just sitting around looking around. And anyway, I pulled her out and really opened my eyes to what I was missing. And it wasn't, and I don't know, and I'm even thinking about flying her again this year, if I maybe take a new female, a juvenile, and then pull her out again, because that was a pleasure flying her. It was really nice, and I don't know if it'll if it'll happen again. I would never have believed that would have happened,
Well, but maybe you should start kind of a new trend for yourself. Not worrying about even making a bunch of new young birds for yourself, but just kind of going back and just taking turns flying some of your geriatric birds. And
well, I'm not that hung up on. I like new birds. I like they don't know what to do. I like to watch a bird that doesn't know what its throttle is and doesn't know what it can and can't do, and they do just crazy berserk stuff flying. I think anyway, and I like that. I like that aspect of them. And when it gets to be really a machine, as far as catching game, I'm kind of bored. I want to get a new one. And so, but this bird just was such a surprise to me. First of all, I just thought, I'm probably wasting my time, but I got to have a bird to fly here for the next couple of months. And so I flew her January, February, and into March a little bit. And she did great. But that's what got me going on that one. And I think I'll try her again. But I got so many birds in there now. Like I said, I've got 26 birds in my project right now, and 13 females, and it's all AI except one pair. By design, I break up copulating pairs because I want to breed certain ways to certain ways. So, anyway, I'm feeding a lot of birds that aren't really adding anything to my project but there's no demand for them anymore anyway in a big way. So I guess I'm just going to raise them and try to refrain from. I don't want to make too many birds. I guess is what it boiled down to. If I don't have a home for them, what am I going to do?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, they obviously have some degree of sentimental value for you, because I have a feeling though that if you really tried, you could find a new home for a decent amount of those birds. Like if you really,
a decent home's the key.
Yeah.
And when you don't know somebody and you don't know what's going on, I'd gladly give them away. I'm not trying to sell them. I sell the juveniles mostly I give some to my friends periodically, but that isn't going to, they're available. All somebody's got to do is give me a call, and I've run it. I even ran an ad a couple of years ago, and I offered to 2 of these females, the older 2 that I've got that I'm thinking of right now. They're laid out. They're done. They're females. They're not going to do anybody any good. But if you want to teach a male to copulate or something like that, or have a warm body next to your male, I'll give them to you. Just write me a letter, or call me, or whatever. And if you got a good home for them, they're yours. I got one call. The guy beat around the bush for about 4 or 5 months. and told me in May that he wanted them, but he couldn't get them till June. And then he called me back and said he couldn't get them till August. And then he said October, and I quit dealing with it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that easy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I shouldn't. I guess I shouldn't like make assumptions or speak on things that I don't really have.
I'm just telling you what happened to me.
No. And yeah, I know. I'm just saying that, I as you were answering that, I was thinking to myself, you know what? You've not really had to deal with that yourself yet. So I mean, it's probably not. You probably shouldn't just assume that it would be that easy, I guess. But
it's hard watching them sitting in there doing nothing and not having a purpose in life. From my perspective, I mean, their purpose in life is at least they're alive. Maybe that's the way they feel. I don't know, but I anthropomorphize a little too much maybe on it.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I think we all also, after we deal with these birds for as long as we have and stuff, I think we all kind of understand too that as long as they're fed and they're not hungry and whatever, they really just kind of don't care to some degree too.
I might carry it a little further, but that's their life. That's what they've known. I mean, I've got 7 generations. I'm that deep in some of these pedigrees, and so they've evolved from pretty much a captive strain for a long time. So who knows? Maybe that is what they don't. Maybe they don't even think about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I
kind of don't even like to ponder it.
Yeah. Well, and that's and how can we really truly understand what they're thinking all the time? I mean,
exactly.
They're so primal. I mean, who knows? But I mean, like I said, all that's interesting. I like learning, what makes people tick, and it's like I said, it's always interesting to me finding out, kind of where people's different priorities are at, kind of what they tend to prefer or kind of, put before other aspects of things. And so, I mean, I think all that stuff's pretty interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I was just curious to see, just if there was any point in time where you thought that, I mean, there's the funny thing too, and kind of another common denominator that I talk to other people I know that have these projects and stuff is at some point they'll be like, all right, I'm done. Maybe at best 3 more years. Well, then 5 years later, there's 3 more years. It's just like
I'm starting to consider it, and I'd like to downsize, but I don't see myself stopping. I always want the available. I just like what I've got, and it took a long time to put together what I got, and I happen to believe that, just like any other animal species, some are better than others, and I think I've kept some good ones, and they seem to be reproducing themselves, and and I wouldn't be opposed if at this point if I could go get a wild one, which would be easy enough to do. I could do it, but I kind of like what I've got.
Mm-hmm. Well, and out of curiosity, along that same vein, then, I mean, how many years was it before you really felt like you were content with what you had as far as your pedigrees and stuff?
I don't know. Don't know that it's completed, but each year, each season, I get a bird, and I think it's a special bird, but I thought that when I had the first one. So, I'm pretty easily pleased. Maybe I don't know, but I think I've got stuff that I like, and if somebody else likes it, that's great. If they don't, well, go get one somewhere else. It doesn't bother me a bit. And there's a lot of people don't think there's any difference in any of them. Everybody's different, but I'm really not trying to please anybody or make any money on it or anything else. Other than paying for some food is all about where I'm at now, but with all these extra birds. But to me, it's just please me, and if whatever's left, I'll sell or I'll give them away. But there's no point in just producing them to just go out to. I sort of think in general, people, no matter what you're talking about, appreciate things more if they got a little skin in the game through paying for it as opposed to being given them. I mean, that's not to say. I mean, I give away a lot of birds, but I think it's a best way to go for the bird too. Somebody's going to take care of it a little better, maybe as best they can anyway. If it pony up some money for it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, and I just didn't know if there was like a particular, how many years went by before you could look back and say, okay, well, sure that it could be better, but. It's like right now, like I'm definitely not content with what I have. I still think it'd be better. But then you reached a point where it's just like after X amount of years, you were like, okay, I think, if it could always be better, but if I wasn't able to add or do anything different at this point, I'd still be content.
Well, and I've evolved. I'm not the end all for deciding what's good and bad. I'm just looking at it for me, but
Sure.
and I've evolved into what I demand or don't demand. That's happened over the years for me too. I mean, I have been doing it for quite a while, and it my priorities are just a nice, healthy specimen at this point. And even that's not always available, even at this point, But,
Yeah.
So, and there's a fair amount of them. I don't know what statistic you want to use, but somewhere between 50% and 80% of them die the first year. And it's got to have something to do with evolution and the fittest survive type thing and all that. And so, I'm trying to be the guy that judges that on what I want to breed to, but it's a pretty hard judgment. Nature's a hell of a lot more. It's a lot more finite and cruel than a human is. It's going to take care of whatever, and it's in its own way, and it isn't always pretty.
No. Yeah, you got nature has a much more critical outlook on life than.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, I mean, and to circle way back, I mean, I am curious though. I mean, was there any other moments in your youth or anybody else that you ran into earlier on that had any other kind of influences on you when you were younger and just on your outlook and what you wanted to pursue or how you wanted to kind of pursue your own falconry, I guess I should say. I mean, I didn't know if there's anybody else that you met early on, some of these other guys were
mentors and
mentors.
I didn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
I wish. I mean, it would have been nice because I probably wouldn't have made as many mistakes as I did as I went through it. But I just ran into some like-minded people about the time I was in college, and it just kind of grew from there. And I'm sure it's changed a lot over between then and now for me and for them too. But I kind of pursued it on the basis of. It was almost competitive in some ways, and I still just it's falconry's a loner sport in a way. I mean, it can be social and lots of fun when it is, but at the end of the day, it's you're trying to look at something that's you've done something with, and not necessarily competitively, but just in a way that you went from point A to point B, and you're showing progression. And I think I have a lot better grasp of. At least I learned a few things, I think, since college, but I'm learning new things too all the time. That's what's keeping me doing it. I mean, I like what I do, it just hadn't gotten old of me yet.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, you know how it is though. I mean, some of these other guys were, it started off in a similar way, no guidance or whatever,
right.
But then they stumble upon, one of these other guys
right.
that,
who was a guru.
Yeah, whatever. And, I mean, I just didn't know if there was any point in early on in your falconry career that you before like college and
right.
and other parts of your life that you were able to stumble onto, to kind of help shape or influence what you wanted to do.
I mean, so everybody shapes you, in a way, but I didn't really have anybody that I was idolized or anything like that. I mean, there were people usually at the same level I was or not at the same level, but no, I didn't have a giant idol or anything like that that took me down a path and followed their path. I'm sure I followed lots of people's ideas over time and used them because they're also similar by the time you get there. But
sure, yeah.
But I didn't consciously. I didn't have one guy that was my idol type thing. I think that's what you're asking me.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily like idol or whatever. Just anybody else that came along the way that just kind of helped alter your perspective on anything.
Oh yeah, I think lots of people have. Yeah, and I don't think they've. I think I get new ideas every day still. I mean, from somebody else mentions something or I'll see somebody do something. Yeah, I ought to try that. I'm open to suggestions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good that, I mean, there's a lot of people that get kind of set in their ways, especially.
Well, I think I'm set in my ways. But I still listen. I just may not admit it.
Yeah. It's like you still listen, but you're still going to do it the way you want to do it.
Yeah. In the end of the day, that's what you end up doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the way I kind of go through life and things in general, I just I like to try and do things right, but I also like to have low expectations. I like to set the bar real low for myself, and just, like I said, I think we all, just have, I found that when I started setting too lofty goals for myself, sometimes it's just like, come on, why even want to shoot for that? I know I'm not going to be able to, to work for that or whatever, but,
I don't look at it quite that way. I'm not that competitive maybe about it or something. Well, I am a competitive person, but I don't think that it doesn't influence me. It doesn't matter to me in a way. It matters, but it's not a prime importance to me whether my bird, whether I learn something from somebody else or whether we're all a collection of our past and of our whoever we run into and whatever we run into. We all adopt certain things from it, whether even subconsciously.
Sure.
And I'm probably just as guilty of that as anybody else. I just don't have, in a big picture, I don't have somebody that really hung the moon.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I mean that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I just was, like I said, I'm just curious because there's so many people that are shaped in different ways, and end up coming into their own in different ways. So, yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, that's all interesting. It's cool that, it seems like no matter what our histories or background are, we all kind of end up getting to the same ish, place, with where we're at and all of this. And, no, I mean, that's really interesting.
Well, we all have different goals. We all have different things we want to do, and
sure.
And with falconry or anything else, and what the fact that I want to do something and somebody else wants to do something else, they're both valid. Mm-hmm. And just I don't think it matters.
No.
In a big picture.
No, it doesn't. But
there, it's useful to be around people that pursue falconry, for example, or even captive breeding, any of that stuff. I've learned a ton of stuff from people just watching what goes on.
Yeah, and you can do things two completely different ways and still
get to the same point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm before we start to kind of overall at least wrap things up some. I mean, I do want to talk to you a little bit about what a couple of your more memorable flights or experiences were. I mean, everybody always seems to have trouble sometimes recalling because some people have so many that they recollect and everything. But I mean, I always like to get at least one good, hunting story or memory or experience with a bird, whatever the case is. And, I mean, I'm sure you have plenty, but.
I got a few, but I had a real special tearsel that I liked. And he just died this past year, but he's 21 years old. And I flew him for about 3 years, and I pulled him out of the chamber. I can't even remember why I pulled him out, but I was just thought, hell, I'm going to fly him. Mm-hmm. And within about a week, it's kind of like the female I was talking about earlier. This bird was, and it was in the fall when I did it, and I took him over to Brian's and turned him loose, and he hadn't flown but maybe 3 times in 5 years, 7 years. He was 8 years old, so it had been about 5 years since I'd flown him. And he just rang up like he'd been flying 10 days earlier. I mean, he went up to 700-800 feet, I guessed, and jumped a grouse, and he came down and caught it right in front of me. And he was the best grouse hawk I'd ever had, even though it was a tiercel. Not sage grouse, but for prairie chickens and, and sharptail and stuff. And anyway, I just remember that flight as it was a kind of a moment. And I remember another flight with him that same deal. I was down in Kansas and with a friend, and we went out early one morning and found a flock of chickens in an alfalfa field. And they were lesser chickens, smaller chickens, and sort of fit his size a little better than the bigger ones. And anyway, he'd learned over time. I just remember watching the flight, and he went real high. He was a high flyer, and he came in underneath the flight, underneath a flock of birds. There were probably 50 birds in the flock, took off flying, and he's way up there high, and he's just following them. I think, damn, he's not going to stoop him. And all of a sudden he tucks up, and he comes in, he goes shooting past the whole group he's under them, below the flock, and they're 50 feet, 75, 100 feet in the air, going away. He comes down, he stoops under him and comes up, and he comes up to the lead bird, and he's almost stalled out. Not stalled out, but he's going fast, but he's almost grouse speed. And I think it was a learned behavior. I'll never know, but I think it was a learned behavior or something he figured out over time, because I watched him do it a couple of times. And he'd come underneath it and grab it, and I never saw him coming. It was just flying along. Boom, he gets caught and bound to. And, when those grouse get bound to, they make about one turn in the foot. If they like to get an appendage, is my thinking. And they get a wing or a foot or a leg. And if grouse panic, and spin around a couple of times, generally they get caught. They just lose it. And, he bound to it and got a hold of something, a wing. I couldn't tell what it was he's pretty far out, but he grabbed it and it was flat in his feet. And I could see him adjusting his feet, glided to the ground with it, kicking around. And I thought, damn, it was just a perfect morning, perfect flight, and one of those days I'll never forget. But it I don't know if that's what you're really looking for.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah.
But it really was one of those days where I thought, man, if they were all like that, I don't know how long I could stand it.
Yeah.
They aren't all like that either. For me.
Well, it's our own personal form of chasing the dragon, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like one of those days where you went, God, it all worked. Mm-hmm. Everything worked out. It was, for me anyway. It was a good high flight. It was a good chase, and he had a technique that was different than most of my birds had. He would come from underneath, but I think he knew. He went past all the other grouse. Mm-hmm. Under him, but right above him in the stoop. And he's got a huge amount of momentum to begin with. He just knew if he was going too fast, he'd tear out of him. Mm-hmm. He'd tear loose. He wouldn't hold them. And 90% of them get caught, I think, by being bound to. Some of them, sometimes you get one that learns to kill them, and that's that. And I've never had very many birds that just kill stuff outright every time. It wasn't I have read about them, heard about them, but mine never have. Most of my grouse have been caught by being bound to. But
yeah, well, and we know that these birds, are so good at what they do, and sometimes I don't think give them quite enough credit for how smart and how good they are at what they're made to do. And it should be obvious, but sometimes I think we're a little less enamored at how we should be, watching these birds learn and become so proficient at these things.
Yeah.
I guess it shows kind of how dumb we are in a lot, of ways,
They're learning all the time too, but
exactly.
An 8-year-old bird, in that bird's case, and he certainly hadn't had the seasoning that a wild one would have had in 8 years, but he'd caught a bunch of birds and had flown a lot. Mm-hmm. It was one of the few birds I ever trained, actually, because most of them I get in a wing too quick, and I'm ruining them all before they ever know what they're doing. Giving them too easy of flights or too tough or whatever. But that bird, I think I only caught 4 or 5 head with him by Christmas. This wasn't any quarry around. And this was long after that happened. But by having him trained, he's the only bird I ever had that I could raise my hand in the air and call him out of a stoop from that high. And he'd come down in a big corkscrew stoop and come in and land on my hand. And I don't know how I even got him. I don't try to make him do that. But it was unusual that he was kind of a wild mentality bird anyway, but he would do that. And it was because he really didn't get enough game hawking in early on, I think.
Well, and we forget sometimes too that once again, kind of going back to not all these birds are created equal. There's some.
Oh yeah. I agree with you there. Yeah. Some people don't agree with that, but
yeah,
they're no different than any other animal. There's good ones and bad ones, and in my opinion, and some innately do things better than others.
Sure. Yeah, and I usually, for anyone that ever wants to have that debate, I usually just respectfully disagree. And yes, I do agree that given any amount of time, yes, you can eventually get most to come around eventually, but to what result? To what end? What's juice versus squeeze? Again, it goes back to that for me.
Yeah, what's your requirement? What's your standard? Mm-hmm. Everybody's got a different standard too, and a different way to look at it. But it's like even in the breeding thing, it's like with racehorses. You're using them as an example of something that's been scientifically, as it could be anyway, bred for certain things. I mean, hell, it's not easy. There aren't many secretariats around, and if they were easy to produce, I don't know if anybody be worrying about it, But it's the same thing with falcons. You stumble onto it to a certain extent, I think. But you breed good ones to good ones, or what you perceive to be good ones, long enough, you're going to probably get a few. And
Very true.
That's just been kind of my simplistic look at it for the way I do it.
Well, and I mean, that's pretty much the way we not just horses or hawks, but also dogs. And everything else.
Anything
too.
Man touches. I mean, pigeons. You can go anything. They try to breed a certain way or do a certain thing with it, and beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, or what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, different people look at different things they want to see happen. So
well, and I mean, shocker. I mean, it's kind of what happens by default in nature too. I mean, the ones that
nature calls them based on what it needs to survive.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if it's lived long enough to even be able to breed, well, I mean
it evolved. You're keeping the fittest alive.
Exactly.
The fittest survive.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, we can go ahead and come close to wrapping this up if you want.
Right.
Here, I mean,
I'm okay, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been fun, and like I said, it's been a real pleasure getting a chance to come up here and talk to all of you over the last couple days, and like I said, I feel like I always learn something, and especially whenever I talk to guys like yourself that have had such a long amount of experience. It's been. There's always, it seems like there's always a lot that I feel like I come out with ahead after these conversations, and I'm sure most people would feel the same way. But I mean, to that note, I also would like to end on the same note I usually end on, and then get a piece of advice from you, and like whatever sentiment or something you might want to leave to current and future generations of people that want to pursue this sport that we love, and we can probably call it good shortly after that.
I don't know that I have any words of wisdom. I'm flattered you asked me to speak to you, and I just think you got to have a passion for what you do and anything you do, and if you're passionate enough and want to do something bad enough, it'll happen. And that's falconry in a nutshell. You got to really have to want to do it, and I don't know how you create that. Either you got it or you don't. Mm-hmm. It's not for everybody, but and what's important is in anything you do like that is that you're having a good time, mm-hmm. and when it gets to be work or that sort of thing, you're kind of missing the boat.
Yep. And as I've had that similar conversation recently as well, and I know for me that was like I said, I'm going back to being repetitious again here, but that was a very valuable lesson for me to learn. I mean, the moment that I felt like I was, having to force it, I was just like, I'm just not going to do it right now.
Right. It's good decision.
Yeah. It's not worth it. And yeah, I mean, there's some things in life, and this, I would definitely include this. It's just like some things just take a lot more persistence than others.
Yeah, it's a tough hobby to you've got to be pretty stubborn to make it work. I think it's just not for everybody probably, but if you like hunting and you like to watch birds and do things, the way I look at it, I get to go out every day that I fly and watch my bird do something that if I tried to follow a wild one around to see the stoops, see the things that go on, it'd be neat. I'd love to do it, but you just can't reproduce it any other way. And that's not my objective necessarily, but that's one of the things I get out of falconry is just the daily fix I get working those birds and watching them do their thing, and I sit back and watch, and it's a really impersonal way to hunt. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've shotgun hunted and rifle hunted and stuff my whole life, and I still do to a certain extent, but I really don't get the pleasure out of it I used to. It's too easy to do. And with falconry, I never get tired of it. It never happened, and it's not me pulling the trigger, so to speak, and that's a lot easier to watch.
Yeah, and to that note, I mean, I still remember coming out and with a bunch of my buddies back in I think it was like 2017. I was only a few years in at that point, and they were coming out to try and pull some IS Goshawks, and got a chance to go and looking for nests with them and during that and everything. And I still remember kind of to that thought anyway, that we were driving down one of these roads kind of at the base of those mountains and stuff where we were at, and we look out the window and we see this coyote running around, and all of a sudden we saw this immature golden eagle start to come down after it and everything, and saw it bind to it and saw it roll it.
I'll be damned.
And we slam on the brakes and just sit there and watch that for a minute. And I mean, it was one of those few exceptions to the rule.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's tough to follow them around and watch that. It's
Yeah.
tough to find it happen.
Yeah, and the coyote ended up fighting it off and running off and stuff or whatever. But there for that minute, we were just like, oh my God, like this is.
I've actually seen them grab antelope and deer. It's uncommon, but I probably a half a dozen times at least, and they're capable of doing things you just can't believe. I mean, they're big birds.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid riding with my mom, trying to get her to stop the car. We're driving from Great Falls, Montana, back over to Whitefish, and I was always watching for birds. That's what I did when we drove around, and I see this eagle. It's in the spring, and I see it's stooping something as we were driving. We're going about 60, 70 mile an hour down the road. A little farmstead off the side of the road. Just dives into this corral and gets up and drives into the corral. I'm watching it as we go by in the car, and it drops down. It grabs a lamb and it lifted it off the ground and tried to, tries to fly off with it and drops it again, trying to stop. Away we went. Lead foot kept going. I just couldn't believe it,
Yeah. How dare she not want to get into a 50-car pileup so you can see this lamb get caught by an eagle?
We're in Montana, man. It's not too much to worry about that in the middle of winter. You hope you see a car once in a while in case you get stuck.
Fair enough.
Anyway.
Yeah, fair enough. But no, like I said, I appreciate your time and being willing to meet up and swing over and have this conversation. And
like I said, I'm flattered you invited me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And hopefully, my hope is that I always get a chance to do this again with people. And I know, what would be really fun, I think, is to get you and a couple of the other guys together and sit there and listen to y'all talk shop and banter back and forth about your falconry opinions and all that kind of stuff. It's always amusing hearing falconers and their varying opinions on things.
Of course, none of them have any.
No, that doesn't exist. It's not a cliche at all. But yeah, no, I think it would be fun.
Well, come back out and go hawking.
There's a chance I might. Are you going to be at the meet and the picnic or whatever in June? Are you going to come to that? Or
I might. I'm not sure. It's too far ahead to think, but I might. I think it's down in Basin or somewhere.
It'll be
not Basin. It's in. Anyway,
Boulder.
Yeah.
If there's a chance I might be coming back for that. Who knows? I might be able to finagle something then.
All right.
Corral some of you together for a few drinks or something.
All right.
Make it really interesting.
Yeah, it would be.
All right. Well, appreciate you, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you very much.